Gosh. Okay, welcome everybody. We'd like to thank you for coming. This is Windows Runtime for the Windows Phone developer. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Doug. Doug, introduce yourself.
So my name's Doug Holland. I'm an architect evangelist with Microsoft, and essentially it's an architect in business development with our developer platform evangelism
Nice.
team.
I'm a developer evangelist, which means I love developers all the way around. So just like you, Doug and I are just developers. We love the platform. We love developing on it. We love Windows Phone. We've hit the same problems that you've hit, and we've probably hit them a little earlier than you have. Hi, Dave. And we're trying to figure out how can we communicate to you to save you some of the headaches that we've got. And so here's where we are. All right, so welcome, and hopefully you get a lot out of it. We'll start with just a level set. Make sure we're all Windows Phone aware here and get all of us thinking on the same line with a brief history of Windows Phone. We'll talk about your options, whether or not you go with the Silverlight route that's continuing along the way, or if you go with the new WinRT route that we have, and then we'll go into a runtime primer and talk about some of the things you should be aware of if you go that route. Sounds good?
We also would, we've got a lot of material to cover, so we're probably going to hold questions to the end if that's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Great. All right, so we started with Windows 7.0 not so long ago. Along comes Windows 7.5.
So with Windows 7.5, that was the first part of where we introduced some level of convergence. We brought the Chakra Internet Explorer engine into Windows Phone. With Windows Phone 8, we unified the underlying kernel of the operating system, and that was step 2 in our unification.
That's right.
With Windows Phone 8.1, obviously you've seen that that continues. We now have essentially 2 paths that you can pick. The Silverlight existing path, or we have the Windows Runtime, which obviously a lot of you guys are interested in hearing about today.
Most of you already recognize this, but I'll say it again just to be clear, is Silverlight all the way through. We've been revving the versions all the way through. It's the introduction of WinRT XAML that we're going to be talking about now and the use of the runtime under it. Beautiful. Okay, so Silverlight is the first option, which, honestly, Doug, we might just stick with.
We could stick with that for one of a few reasons. One would be you guys probably have an existing investment in the code that you've written. Another would be the existing install base that you have. And then there's a couple of areas which are not yet converged.
And when we talk about the existing install base, what we're really talking about is the fact that Windows 8.0 is still the primary operating system out there for Windows Phone, right? And so you might want to take advantage of that if your app is really to the point where you're ready to bring it to market today. At the same time, you might be at a point where it's greenfield, or maybe you're just slightly in, or you're wanting to take advantage of all the convergence across the platform. All right, so there's some other things that are just plain gotchas.
Yep, some of those gotchas are camera lenses, voice over IP, lock screen wallpaper, the clipboard API, simple sound effects from XNA if you've used that, or the ability to run underneath the lock screen. So
these are things that they're a little bit on the edge, right? Every application doesn't use them. Probably the bulk don't either. But if your application does, or the one you're thinking about does, it's already set. You're going to be building a Silverlight application, right? So if you know for a fact that you're going to be sticking to Silverlight, it's okay right now if you stand up, but that would be awful. Same thing. All right, it's great. The reality is we totally respect your investment, right? Microsoft put a lot of effort into the runtime. We care about the runtime. There's no getting around it, but we also care about you guys and the work that you're putting into it. So that's why you see Silverlight continuing, and you see all the features being rolled into it. There's a lot of neat stuff in it. Let's start with the idea of we stick with Silverlight. I'm not going over. I could at least retarget, right? I could go from 8.0 to 8.1.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of reasons why you would want to retarget. You're going to be able to access the SD card. So some of the new phones are going to have an SD card in there. Geofencing is kind of cool, so your users can know when your phone is aware of when you enter a geofence, et cetera. You've got app-to-app single sign-on, app-to-app communication, sharing rather, and much, much more.
And much, much more, yeah. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you get as far as benefits when you upgrade, and there's no reason not to. I will say this, though. Before you go and retarget your application to 8.1, go ahead and branch and keep 8.0. You might as well have both in the store for sure, and then put all of the advanced features in 8.1. It's pretty easy to retarget. Right-click the project and say retarget, and it's done. There's no right-click an 8.1 project and say back target to 8.0. So take care when you do it.
And when you hit that retarget, it's actually going to pop up a little dialog with a link. That'll pull up a document that tells you a little bit more about what you're about to do with the retargeting.
Yep, that's right. All right, so Sam has a session, and we'll do this a lot during this session. We're going to touch on a lot of pieces that just as the idea is, as Windows Phone developers, we're trying to help you get as much out of it and just be ready. And so we're going to cover a lot fast. But there are sessions dedicated to each of these topics, and they go into a much deeper dive. And so there's one, you can go to Sam's, and you can get all the features of Silverlight 8.1 that are going on there. Right, so a lot of great stuff. Then again, I might move away from Silverlight and decide go ahead and take advantage of the runtime.
Indeed. With the Windows runtime, obviously, you've got the highest level of convergence with Windows. You've got the latest tooling that we're offering. You've got new controls, new XAML controls that are now going to be converged with Windows and Windows Phone, such as the hub control. You've got language options, such if any of you decided to suddenly just want to do JavaScript, that's an option for you now. And also future investment.
Yeah, and the future investment is real, right? Microsoft loves Windows, and the runtime is the heart of Windows. So there certainly is going to be a lot of investment and momentum towards it. So there's a practical reason to consider WinRT XAML for sure. What are these graphics on the right? When we look at the slide, there's two, right? Well, the first is the solution structure of a Windows 8.0.
Yes.
Or Windows Phone 8.
So on the left is essentially the kind of app frame that you would have already today. So last week, before coming to build, you created a new project. That's kind of the structure you're looking at right there. You'll see that a Windows runtime-based phone project is a little smaller, and there's a few things that you don't have anymore. The app manifest XML, you were using a package app.x manifest. And if you want to learn a little bit more about this, Navit's talk on universal apps will also discuss some of these aspects in more detail.
Lots of these sessions have already occurred, so you can find them online when they are available. All right, let's talk about the runtime. Maybe I've never heard of it, or maybe I have heard of it, but I just don't really get it, or whatever. I'm a Windows Phone developer and haven't dabbled yet. I'm about to dabble. Let's give them at least the highest level.
A little bit. Yeah, so some aspects of the runtime is going to look kind of familiar to you. It's going to look like .NET a little bit, but and in part, some of those things are because we use the same metadata spec as .NET, and the language projections effectively surface Windows runtime to you in a way that looks and feels just like what you're used to.
Yeah.
As an example, most of the types in the Windows runtime outside of XAML do not use type inheritance because of limitations of some other languages. However, the CLR projection here actually makes it look like the storage file inherits from the object class, and you have various access to those methods. The framework projection provides some extension methods when the CLR projection is just not able to really help you out there. Those extension methods such as stream, et cetera, those will help you bridge the gap.
So let me pull up ILDASM. You ever used ILDASM before?
I've used it, a little while ago, So ILDASM is a tool that ships with since the first version of .NET, and it allows you to explore the metadata within assemblies. Only we're not using assemblies today. We have these WinMD files. So Jerry, why don't you open up a WinMD file there?
Now I can open up a .NET assembly really easily here, and I can disassemble and look at all the structure and kind of look into it. Definitely like that.
Oh,
there we are. But let me pull up a WinMD. So a WinMD is actually a metadata file for a runtime object that's already in the system. And so you can see the structure here. I can go into it as if it was a .NET project. Again, that's because all of the structure of the WinMD is identical and standard to the way I do .NET files. Or .NET assemblies. And so it's pretty handy, and what also is handy, that projection also allows me to see all the types and pieces like that, so it feels comfortable to me as well, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, beyond just projection, so that I see all the types that I want, right? And to make that point just a second clearer is, I might see a C++ type of like a pointer integer or something, like a pint or something like that. And I won't see that when I'm using the runtime. It'll translate everything into a .NET type for me, so it all feels very comfortable. So beyond that, though, we also have asynchronous programming. And if you're a Windows Phone developer, it's not required that you do asynchronous programming. You could certainly get around it. There's a couple edge cases here and there.
Yeah, there were some types in Windows Phone 8 that you might have used a lot of async in. So the geolocator is an example. You had an opportunity to use async there. But you could kind of get away without using the new async methods with Windows Phone 8. Not so much with Windows Phone 8.1.
So let me walk through just for a second. Why do we have async? Well, one of the reasons is the runtime already looks at all of its capabilities, and anything that might be more than 50 milliseconds in time is defaulted to be an asynchronous operation. And the reason it does that is so the user's experience is really positive, and we don't lock up the UI for any reason whatsoever. So when I start when I start working with it, I really love the fact that C# already has the async and await keywords built in, so I can do async programming really simply. So some of you may already be familiar with it, so we'll just speed through this as quickly as possible. Here's an example, the button click event. The button click event is already marked so it can be asynchronous. I don't have to handle the completed event or anything I might have done before in early asynchronous operations. Now I can do it all in line as if it's synchronous, and I can mark or decorate the application as async, and from that point forward, I've communicated to the compiler that it goes ahead and does all the work behind the scenes of basically what I would have done before, to be honest. But now it's a lot easier for me to look at, follow, and debug, and it was really spaghetti-like without it. And so the first thing you can see in the line is I create a web service. The next thing I'm going to go fetch the data from that web service, but that's an asynchronous operation. In order to do that asynchronous operation, all I have to say is await. From that point forward, it will release the method for me. The button is waiting for that method to be released. You've seen it before, where a button gets pressed down and is held down, and there's all kinds of operations that are going on, and eventually it comes back up, almost like a not responding. So that's the reason asynchronous exists, so it releases that and everything else that might be waiting for that method. That doesn't mean, however, that the third line executes yet. So the third line still will wait for the asynchronous operation to complete, however long, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 1 millisecond, whatever it is, for that asynchronous operation on the service to be done. Now there's one extra piece around asynchronous development that really is a gotcha if you haven't seen it before, and that's the idea around deferrals. And so again, it will not release the method until I call await, but as soon as I do call await, it's immediately released. Now, if the calling method or the calling system is waiting for that to be released, for example, it's calling to say, hey, you're being suspended, you should save all of your data, but all of your saved data is actually calling out to a service that's asynchronous. As soon as you make that asynchronous call, it will immediately terminate your application and no longer execute. Well, that's not what you want, right? Because you're still saving your data and still doing work. So a deferral allows you to say, not just yet. You may get a return back from this method, but still wait until I manually and explicitly call deferral complete.
Indeed.
Perfect. Now, it's pretty complicated stuff, so if you want to see more about it in a lot more detail, of course, we just sped right through it. You can go to Microsoft Virtual Academy, where you can go to C# Fundamentals. AKMS is the site for you. All right. Maybe to make it really clear, let me do a quick demo. You don't care?
Let's do that. No,
All right.
Go for it.
All right, great. Let me open up Visual Studio. 2013.
Indeed.
Update
2.
2. Yeah, I've got it right here. All right. So we'll start just by looking at the project dialog. I think it's worth at least glancing at. It's changed slightly in the reordering of things. I see there still is the Silverlight node, but that's not what we mean, right? But I don't see the Windows Phone node that you may have gone to before and been comfortable with. So now we have a new node in the hierarchy. It is the Store apps, and included in that is the universal apps that everybody's talking about, as well as that's where Windows Phone apps, which Windows Phone apps in that node is basically the one we all knew before. That's all the Silverlight apps that we had known before. So I'll create a brand new one. We'll make it a converged app.
Let's do it.
A universal app. All right, so I'll go ahead and create that. You know, it'll create the 3 parts for me. It'll create both the Windows Phone, and the shared project for me. We'll only play around inside the Windows Phone one for now. My project's open. I'll change the startup project so it'll be the phone, and I'll go in and we'll do everything inside the onNavigated2. So onNavigated2 is not an asynchronous method. You can tell because it's not decorated with async. All I have to do is add that in. I'll go ahead and do it real quick. ASYNC. Now it's asynchronous. I'll get a build warning now because I'm not doing anything asynchronous inside it. Doesn't hurt anything, of course. But now I need to paste in some code so you guys can kind of see it. So I'll do it in a piece at a time so we can talk about what it does. And it'll be nice because one of the things we'll do here is we'll read and write a file. Read and write a file is one of the things that jumps right out at you when you are interacting with the runtime. Because if you're a .NET developer, you're very accustomed to going to system.io.file and interacting with the file system so easily, right? Well, all that's gone, all right? Don't be surprised, but it's all been pulled down into the runtime. That's because of this projection that allows us to go to JavaScript or C++ or C#. It can all be consistent across all the languages.
Indeed.
So let's talk about the first one we'll do. So the first one we'll do is go and reach the folder. So just like Windows Phone, I have isolated storage. We call that our local folder here. We have additional places to store data as well. Of course, we have the temp folder. The temp folder is a transient data you would put in. It's reliable as long as your application is running, but when your application is not running, it might be reclaimed if resources are constricted. We also have the ability to roam as well. So we have a roaming folder I can put data into, and it'll roam over to my same app with the same ID that's running on Windows 8. Very cool. But we'll just do a local folder, so just think isolated storage for now. And I go and get that here from the static property of local folder. And unlike a Unlike let's see, it would be a system.io.folder. This is going to be a windows.storage.storage folder. There you go. It flows right perfectly. And so I will go and create it. This is a create or get, either one. So I've set it up to open if exists. And all right, so now we have the folder and we know where we want to save it. It goes and gets the root folder of local storage and then the subfolder of my folder right under it. Now let's go and get the file that we're going to write to. So I'll create the file. So it's right here. Just all I have to say is subfolder.create file async. And hopefully you see that operation after operation is awaited. That's because all of these things, which really could take time, because you never know about the I/O operations inside a device, could actually take more than 50 milliseconds, and so they're asynchronous. Just imagine all of the extra handling you would have to do if you had to have an event that you handled every time. All right, so the next thing I would do after I've created the file is we can write it out. It's easy enough because the windows.storage.file.io has a lot of helper methods inside it that allows us to write and read to a file no problem. That's why it's a one-line operation. And then we can also read from it as well, right? So this is the operation you would expect. It's clean and easy. It's not in the namespace where you might be looking for it, but it is all asynchronous, and that's an important part around using the runtime. It's going to be asynchronous over and over and over again. Familiarity and comfort with the await and async is going to make this an easy transition.
Exactly. And if you're not comfortable with those await and async today, like give it 5 minutes and it'll become second nature.
Yeah, get over it.
Exactly.
Just get over it. You'll be fine. All right, so we've written the file. So you can see here, we create the file, and then I write it out so it has a little bit of text inside it. I have a handle to the file right here, just in the variable called file. And let's email it. So that'll be an easy thing to do.
I think so, yeah.
Now,
we
I'm
can
a
do
Windows
that
Phone
on Windows
developer.
Phone.
I know that I can't actually email a file.
Yesterday, you couldn't email a file.
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, announcing right now. No, but sort of. So I go to email a file, and it looks as easy and consistent as I'm used to. The email message, and I can create the subject and create a recipient as well. And then I have this groovy line right here on 56 where I can add a new attachment and pass that file handle that is not just a normal file handle, it is a random
storage file.
Is a random access, I just lost it. It's a random access stream. That's what it is. A stream that we certainly have never dealt with before, right? And anyway, so I can go from there. Let's see what it looks like. I'll go ahead and run it. It'll deploy it out to the emulator for me. And because it's in the navigated, it'll happen very, very quickly. It'll have no UI to the piece, and it'll try and run it. Now, here's another thing that a phone developer can't do. They can open up the emulator and send and receive emails at all, because I can't use my Microsoft account.
Yeah, beforehand, you could not add an email account to the emulator, although maybe we can now.
Now you can, well, yeah, actually you can.
Actually, you can.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so it asks me which email account to use. I only had one. It's called Outlook. Well, I mean, it's called Outlook, but it is also using Outlook. That just happened to be related. And so here it is all set up for me, pre-populated with the subject, just like we did in the code. Has the file attached to it, and it's ready to send. If I go ahead and send it, it goes off into the ether. And then you can see up in the notification center here at the top, I can pull it down, and I've got a new message. If I pull this down, Mr. Microsoft has sent me a file. I'll go ahead and click that. Hello, Mr. Microsoft. There it is. When I click the file, it goes ahead and downloads it, asks me if I want to open it. I'll click it, and Mobile Word will open it, and I can see there it is. Hello, build. There it is.
Nice.
No reason to applaud, because that's kind of cheesy. All right, but we'll leave it at that. I mean, it's awesome in its own way, and you would be applauding the team, not me, but still, there's no reason to applaud. Just remember when the avowals come out, right? That's really, really important. All right. Yeah, you're like missing. That's nice. All right, let's get back and blast on through here. All right, so the application data namespace, just as a reminder, includes not just local data, not just your isolated storage that you're used to in Windows Phone, but also this temp folder and also this ability to put it in roaming data, which is a huge benefit, but really only for converged apps that have both a Windows and a Windows Phone app.
And there you'll see that there's a limit of 100K on the roaming data, but if you need more than 100K, then that's an opportunity to potentially leverage the cloud and store the roaming data in the cloud.
Yeah. Okay, now I know what Windows Runtime is, and I've chosen WinRT. I'm ready to go that route. I'll commit into it. I'm leaving Silverlight behind because I don't have any of those blockers. There's something you should know, just between us. And here we go. All right. So first of all, here's a fun one.
What? No message box?
What? No message box? This is a fun killer and probably a well search term.
Yep.
Where's the message box in WinRT? Well, it's easy to find. It's not there. That saves you a lot of time. Should we go to the next slide?
No, I think we should look at this just for a moment. We've got instead of the message box, you're going to use the message dialog, and that's going to provide you a fully asynchronous equivalent, but it also has some enhancements there. With message box, you were limited to OK, cancel, and a set number of buttons. Here, actually, you can leverage the UI command class to provide any number of distinct buttons you want, and not limited to just OK and cancel.
That was kind of a pain in early phone development because everything was OK, cancel. Do you like my app? OK, cancel. That's OK if you mean yes. All right, great. What if you happen to use tasks? So tasks are a common thing inside Windows Phone development. Tasks allow you to do all kinds of things and allow the operating system to do it for you, right? So a common one might be the interaction with the marketplace, like review.
Store now.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. So beforehand, if you wanted to actually call the marketplace review task, but now we don't have that. So instead, we're going to use a URI to actually launch that. And there's probably a term there maybe some of you have heard before, Zune. So the store is using the Zune URI handler. And how do we call it?
Just for the sake, who owned a Zune? Anybody? Did you really own a Zune?
It was a gift from Microsoft.
Oh, well. Who bought a Zune? That's what I really meant to say. Did you really? Was it HD?
Yeah, even with the little...
I would like to give this to you as kind of a
thank you.
consolation. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just the way it goes. This is nice. This is one of those chargers for your phone. You know, you have it on the plane so you can play Plants and Zombies without your battery going dead. It's nice. Yeah. You're welcome. Just remember me when you're playing Plants vs. Zombies. All right. So we might have to launch one of these URIs, and these URIs have a special protocol, not HTTP colon, but in this case it's Zune colon. And how do we launch a URI? Because usually I use a web browser task.
Yeah, but that also doesn't exist. So in this case, you're actually going to use the launcher class, and there's a launch URI async method that you're going to just pass the URI.
Yeah, only 6 tasks are on this list. You know, you can see the picking an address, making a phone call, composing an SMS. They're all replaced by other namespaces in the runtime, but they're all replaced by other namespaces in the runtime. They're not all sitting right there inside tasks like you're used to, and it's just one of those things that you need to know.
Yeah, some of those you're obviously going to use a URI, and others there's a little helper method.
I build an app and I interact with the user. I have a front-end UI, but sometimes I need my app to do something when it's in the background. So obviously I would use a background agent. Wow, there's no background agent. What am I supposed to do? I use the background task.
So with Windows Runtime, you have background tasks. It's essentially the same model as you've seen with Windows 8 if you've done development on Windows 8. But here we have a couple of nice little additions with triggers and conditions.
Yeah, triggers and conditions are a big deal, and it's the sort of thing you kind of wish was already in background agents for Windows Phone. So a trigger and condition basically you can say something along the lines of this. Let's make it a big number so it's more accurate and actually possible. In 1 hour, I would like to have my background agent run, but only if the internet is accessible. Perfect. So imagine how you would do that with a background agent. You would have to actually run in an hour, then test them for the network. And you don't have to do that now with WinRT tasks. So WinRT background tasks have conditions and triggers that run before your application, before your background task actually executes. And that's a big deal because you also have a lot of constraints around quota. So I can't just go crazy and send all of the network traffic that I want because there's a network quota. I can't go crazy and grow as big as I want because there's a memory quota. And probably most importantly, I can't just go forever because there's a CPU second quota. And so having the operating system do a lot of the work for you in triggers and conditions before it even gets to your task is a great deal because of this limit in CPU quota. And so let's just talk about that for a split second here. It's no pun intended. Just a CPU second. Can you imagine saying that? Just a CPU second. Okay. A CPU second goes really, really fast. That's, I think, an important way to start, right? You've only got a CPU second to do your work. And so asynchronous programming doesn't take a full second, right? It's not the same as a clock second. So it could stretch out a little bit. But if you have a background agent in Windows Phone and it does quite a bit of work, and you're thinking about putting that as a background task in WinRT, it is not going to work. That's just the way it goes because you only have a certain amount of CPU to process. And so you have to think this through as you're building out your application. And sometimes you have to really re-architect the idea of what you're doing. Or redesign. Architect isn't a verb, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
And of course, we do not have resource-intensive tasks in Windows Runtime. That's something else
that's right.
to mention.
Okay, there's tons more. You can go to Sean's session or see Sean's session online, and you can get a super deep dive. He goes into way more detail and explains all those quotas in clear detail. No doubt about it. Every app has a tile.
It does, but not every app has a live tile.
Well, that's true. All right.
But so if you want to write an app that has a live tile, then in the Windows Runtime, you're going to become very familiar with the Tile Update Manager class. And there you have a couple of options of how to actually update your tile. You've got update method, just as a local update. And there we've got an interesting class that may be of interest.
Yeah, so the local update is when your UI is running, right? This is what you would do. You immediately update your tile. Your background task can do it too, just immediately update your tile. But sometimes, those templates aren't exactly what you want. You want your tile to be really unique or really special or it really needs to deliver whatever it is you're going to do. So you need to draw it out, and there's been all kinds of ways to do it and create a custom tile. Now I can do it all in XAML. I can render it on a background task, and I can post it as my new tile. That's a big, big deal. And that's a brand new thing. The XAML rendering background task allows that to happen, and it's awesome. I mean, it is awesome all the way around. If there is one slam dunk reason to switch over, it might just be the XAML rendering background task. But there's also scheduled, which is putting it on a clock and saying, here's the content and exactly what I want, but don't put it out there till a certain time. Then we also have periodic and then push that comes across the internet, where notification services gives me an update to my tile.
And the one thing also to note here is some of you probably used MPN before. So we don't have MPN. Well, MPN still exists if you still want to leverage that from your Silverlight apps and existing apps. But we have converged with Windows with the Windows notification service, WNS. So you're going to be using that in the future.
MPN is the notification service for Windows Phone.
Correct.
Not going anywhere. It's not, absolutely. All right, so if you want to know a little bit more, a deeper dive on live tiles, you can go to Matt's session or look it up online. He goes into great depths. All right, now around navigation. We all know that Windows Phone uses the Silverlight navigation framework and works beautifully and everything you would expect. There are a few changes when you go over to WinRT. It doesn't operate the same. First is just the navigation itself.
So with the navigation itself, you are going to navigate not to a query string, but you're actually going to navigate to a type. So it's strongly typed. You're navigating to type of map page in this example. The next thing you're going to notice is, and we discovered this ourselves, is the first time that you hit the back button, wait, it doesn't actually do what I was expecting, and the app is closed. So what you actually need to do is you need to handle this back pressed event, and there determine that the hardware back button has been pressed, and determine if you can go back, and if you can go back, set the handle to true, and it will work just as you expected.
I like to put it in the window created method in app.xaml. Where do you put yours, out of curiosity?
I put mine sometimes in the app.xaml.cs file. I'm trying to think which
like in the
event
on
now.
launched or something like that?
On launched, I think, yeah.
That's good enough, yeah. I mean, that's just as good. I'm not comparing. I like to put mine in Windows created because why not? All right, so Robert has a session on navigation in depth, right? The reality is, since you're not navigating to URI, you're navigating to a type, you got to think about how you're going to do that even in secondary tiles and when you navigate back. And because you're navigating, and because you're passing in not a query string, but an object, which should be a string, by the way, but let's say you don't pass it a string, you pass an object, you have to figure out what are you going to do now, right? So there's a whole bunch of changes here, even though conceptually it's exactly the same. Conceptually. All right, now around networking, there are a few changes. Some of them are helpful.
Yeah.
They're all helpful. Sorry.
So with the networking APIs, just like many of the others, they're all now fully asynchronous. And so there was an HTTP client class beforehand, although now we're using the windows.web.http HTTP client. And that has an asynchronous get async method in there that's going to return our data asynchronously. Then we can check whether or not we got an OK response code from our service. Mm-hmm. And then we can now do a read on the content using the read as string async, and that'll give us back our
the way it
XML
operates is very
JSON.
similar to the old control, only now it's uniform across the entire runtime.
Right.
Yeah, every language will do it the same, JavaScript included, so that's pretty cool. Now comes localization, and localization is a big deal. Windows Phone is successful in America, I guess, but it's really successful in other countries. In some countries, seriously, right? And when you look at it, if you write an application that's geared towards an American market all in English, that's great, but you really limit your market, especially the opportunity that the store kind of brings to you. So along comes localization, the ability to have your strings in other languages, and it's a pretty big deal. Before we talk about that, I want to back up to the multilingual toolkit from Bing. The multilingual toolkit allows you to leverage the Bing translator to do all of your strings like that. It's totally worth looking up. It's well documented. We're not talking about it right now, but it's super cool, and I didn't want to not at least give a shout out to it. All right, so look at this text block. It's just a simple text block you would see in any XAML application, and it has a X:" name. Of course, we'd give it an X:" name if we needed to reference it from code behind. Probably if you're referencing your XAML controls from code behind, you're not doing MVVM right, but that's up to you. You guys can do it however you want. But look right below it is X:"UID. X:"UID is, we had that in WPF, but for other purposes. The X:"UID is the way that we will recognize a control in the localization service, basically. And why is there X:"UID and X:"name?
Well, one opportunity you have there is actually you can use the same localization ID for multiple controls, but those controls could have different names because you're going to access them from code and operate with them differently.
Yeah, you may have a button with a similar purpose many times on one page. That button can have the same XUID because it's going to be localized with the same string over and over again. So you wouldn't want to have, you couldn't have the same X:"name, right? All right, well, actually, it may not make sense, so I'll just go ahead and build it and show off what it would look like. Here inside the application here, let's see, oh, beautiful. Here inside our application, I've commented everything out so you can sort of see what's going down. And let me go into main page XAML and build it out. It's done beautiful here, it's beautiful. I'll add a text block. All right, hopefully you've seen this before if you're a XAML developer. And I'll add XUID, and I'll call it title text block. There you go. So XUID doesn't give me any access. I can't access XUID from code behind or anything either. It's really only for localization right now. And I'll give it a text value right now of tilde title. And I'll also give it a style of static head.
So Jerry, what was the tilde for there?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Although, hang on just a second, I can't think it. I can't type and think at the same time. All right. The tilde really is an indicator just to me, right? I use this as a convention for myself so that I know this is a hard-coded value that's actually going to be replaced whenever I go into localization. So if I don't do it like this, and I go into the English version because I'm debugging, and it says title, and then it says title as it goes into English, but I actually didn't localize, but I thought I did, then it just sneaks right under the radar and I didn't get to see it. So this tilde just helps me know that it's the way it should be. Speaking of convention, I'm going to add a folder inside this project called strings, right? So strings is just where I'm going to put all my localization strings. And inside that, I'll have a subfolder that represents a culture. So in this case, culture would be ENUS, which is English US. And then inside there, we're going to use a resource file, but it's a different type of resource file.
Indeed, this time it's a resw file.
Yeah, so we know we have res files in .NET, right? And they're all binary and nice. And we also have resx. No, what's the one in Windows Phone?
Resx.
X. Yeah, we have resx, right? Which is just a fancy dancy XML file. And then we have resw. All right, did I get it right?
Yeah.
Now we have resw. And so resw is another fancy dancy XML file. It's pretty nice. And there's a lot of reasons for it. And honestly, I make it sound trivial, but there's some seriously good reasons for it as well. And all I need to do is add a resource file. So here I am inside that en-us folder. I'm going to add a resource file. I'm not going to change the name or anything like that. And I'll open it up to show it's just a name-value pair. It's really convenient. I can go in here and paste in the name of BLOC. Is that what I called it? Hang on, let me double check. I want to get it right. No, there's the XUID. So the XUID is title text block. I'll go in here and I'll make the same thing right here. So you might think, now that I've given the value here, now I go over to the other one and say what its text needs to be. But no, that's not right. Now I've just made the reference to the UID. Now I am going to indicate which of the properties I'm going to change. So I want to be able to change more than one. Let me give you an example. So here I am. I'll say .text, EXT, and it'll be called, we'll make this the player, right? This is going to be a video player. But then in the next one, I might say the same UID, right? Text block, title text block, and I'll say foreground, and I'll make it green, let's say. Now, In English, whenever the locales is ENUS, then it'll change it and make sure that the text reads the player, and it'll also change the color to make sure it's green. I could go in, we could create French now. In fact, let me go ahead and show what it would look like if I were going to do French. I'll say add new folder. All I have to do is do a fr-fr and add another resource file, and I'll actually copy the one I have here so I don't have to type it all twice. I'll open it up. You can see it's a save, so I'll just change it. I'll translate this now to French, les player, and change it now also to yellow. All right. So now, when it goes to when the culture changes to French, it will be nicely translated into French, and it won't show up as green. It'll show up as yellow. And I could keep going, right? Any property that I need to change. Sometimes I'll go to a language where I need to change left to right to left. Sometimes I'll go to a language where I need to change the size or maybe even the font size to make sure that it fits into the right area of my page, right? So that gives me all this sort of flexibility so as I localize, I don't start jacking up the way my application looks, so to speak. Great. You want to see how it works?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. All right, so here's main page. You can see it's tilde title. That's what you would expect. And you can see that it's white. I'll go ahead and run it here. It will deploy it up to the emulator for me. It will do it.
Build starting.
It'll do it. It'll do it right now.
Going.
No problem. It builds almost over. That's what I think.
Builds. Right.
Sorry, just kidding. All right, there it is. No need to applaud. I didn't build it. It's just, I just am implementing what was already written. But no doubt it's cool. See how it's green? See how it says the player? And if I were to go in and change the language of the phone, which would be, I would go to settings, language, and switch to French. Should we do it?
Sure.
Oh my God.
Let's do it real quick.
Stay on the script. All right, no problem. What could go wrong? All right. I mean, we thought about doing it, but it seemed too crazy. All right, so I'll right-click French right here. No, you don't right-click in the phone because you don't have a mouse in the phone. And I'll say move up. Now it's prioritized at the top. You might think you go to the operating system and change the language of the operating system. You go to your start screen, as I did several times wrongly in our test.
Practice.
So, yeah. You do have to restart the phone, so I'll go ahead and leave it. Oh, au revoir. That means please wait. I think. I don't know. I don't speak the language. It'll come back up here. It'll be a quick restart. It's totally worth it. Anybody planning to go see Captain America? All of us. We see it for free. Okay, great. Me too. Did anybody get this shirt? The Captain America shirt? Oh, where's mine? It's awesome. The one from Develop. It's sweet. All right, anyway. All right, here we are. Look at this. I will go back in. We'll debug it again. And it'll pull it up. This time, everything's in French. Is everything in French? Oh, yeah, look at that.
Almost everything.
All these words.
All
look
right,
at that. Look at that. And now it's yellow and translated into French, sort of, right? No reason to clap. Thank you. There's no reason not to. Well done, Doug. It's excellent. It's absolutely. All right, let's get back to the slides and see where we are. Pretty cool. By the way, don't skip it, right? Don't skip localization. It's the easiest thing to skip. Don't skip localization, right? Did I already say? I said it already.
I think you said. Yeah.
All right, great. There it is. Should we do the demo? Just kidding. All right, Apps Without Borders. It's Cameron's doing his session, or he's already done a session, and you can go into great detail, and he'll do way more than I just did. Although, that was pretty good.
It was pretty cool.
All right. You might use orientation. Rotation is automatic, right? You go portrait, go landscape. Your application already tries to rotate for you. You can turn that on and off, depending on how you want it. But you might also want to fine-tune it. You might just want to tweak it. And if you do, then you're going to use the size change of the current window. That's the way we do it in Windows. That's the way we do it now in Windows Phone with WinRT, right? Beautiful. And, of course, you would use visual states to do the whole thing, because that's the right thing to do.
So if any of you have written apps for Windows, you're probably familiar with the notion of pickers. So one of the ones you've probably tried out is the file picker, the file open picker, rather. So here we're going to create a file open picker, and we're going to set the file type filter that we want to access. So we're going to write a video player, I think. So let's set it to the MP4.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, let's
code it
just
while
write
you're
that
talking.
right now.
Keep going.
Now, one thing you've probably noticed here, if you have done that, is in Windows you would call pick single file async. We don't have that in Windows Phone.
Yeah.
So instead we're going to do pick single file and continue. And the reasoning why we're doing that will become apparent in a moment.
Well, it doesn't look async at all to me.
It's not async.
I mean,
no.
yeah. Something's totally broken
Something's
about
up, because it's going to take me more than 50 milliseconds to pick a file.
All right, so let's explain what's going on. So now, when I go, if I'm in Windows, let's go to Windows first because that's the easy one to understand right away. I say go pick a file. As soon as I do, the picker pops up over the screen. And while it's over the screen, my application is behind it and just sitting there waiting. And so the user goes in and picks and does whatever they need to. That seems great because I'm in Windows. But now let's go over to a phone, and let's go to a phone with lower hardware and lower memory, right? Now all of a sudden, my app is running, doing whatever. Let's say you've got awesome 3D animations. Great, whatever. And so it's doing all this stuff as well as the picker on top. The picker on top they're using is actually going to be an extension. Now they're going to go out to OneDrive. They're going to go to OneDrive and go get a file, and they're going to pull that down. Think of the memory use. Think of the processor use. Think of all the things that are now competing with your application that's running in the background really for no good reason. See what's happening? So instead, now we use continuation. Continuation on the phone suspends your app while they pick. Not just suspends your app, but any app that goes into suspension. Any app that goes into suspension, in fact, that's worth saying out loud, any app that goes into suspension could be terminated at any time based on constrained resources. And so your application could be in the background while the user's going to go pick their file from OneDrive, right? And while they're in OneDrive, they're picking their file, they've run out of memory, your application gets terminated, they pick it, no problem, the picker closes, how does it pass it back to your app now that's been terminated?
Let's see.
No.
Okay. So in the onActivated method, you are going to have to switch on the kind of activation that you've got. And so we can determine whether or not we've been activated for a file picker continuation. And here we're going to basically pass our event args into a method that we've written called onContinueFileOpenPicker. So let's just...
The onActivated method, by the way, is in AppXAML. And it's like right next to onLaunched or window created where we were talking before. And it's sitting right there waiting. And let's show off. We have a full demo kind of just sitting there waiting. I think it'll be good. We're not going to be able to code this right in front of you because it's several lines and the odds of getting it right are minimal. So we'll just show you an app that we have put together. And that's worth mentioning right now that the app we've put together and a couple other are demos, we're going to wrap together and put it in a zip file.
And you'll be able to download it probably sometime this weekend.
And we'll hide it on the internet somewhere. That's exactly right. Okay. Let's begin with the user just decided they were going to open a file. So the user clicks the Open File button. You can see just like the code that was on the slide, we create the picker right here. Can everybody see in the back? Is it big enough for you? I hope so, because you're not yelling loud enough. All right, so here's the picker, and we call pick single and continue. From that point forward, your app just got suspended, just like that. Now, not only did it get suspended, but it might be terminated, so be sure to take care of business before you do all this stuff and make sure you have suspended set up correctly in your AppXAML. Nonetheless, it just happened. Now the picker is on front. The user goes, they browse, take forever to do it. They get a phone call, they go back, all these sorts of things can happen. Now they come back and they're in AppXAML. So here we are in AppXAML in the onActivated method.
So that's pretty much as I just explained that part. So let's just move on to the onContinueFileOpenPicker.
Ah, very good. Right below it.
Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is determine whether or not we've been terminated. If we have been terminated, then the first thing we have to do is reestablish our frame and the content within the frame and then activate that frame. If we haven't been terminated and our frame is existing, then we can simply cast that as our main page and call a method that we've declared on our main page called continueAsync.
It's worth pointing out that the demo we're about to give you is pretty simple. I think demos given to developers often are a little too simple at times, but sometimes they're too complicated, so it's hard to find the right way. Nonetheless, we have one page. It is main page. And main page is the one that we know to navigate to. You might need to come up with a more sophisticated way of knowing which page you're going to need to navigate back to. You might be able to pick a file from one page and from another, and you don't want to just default navigate to one, assuming that's the right one. The nice thing is we have continuation data.
The other thing to mention here is that when you do download the code, there's going to be two demos in there. There's a video player and there's also a notepad type app. The video player, we're not demonstrating the file save picker. There's also a file save picker. So check out the code when you download it and you'll see how to do that with continuation as well.
Yeah, you got to focus while you're doing the file save picker. It's
a little...
That's why you pick this demo.
See.
It's a lot easier.
We picked the easy one.
All right, so continue async in our page. That is a custom method. So I'll jump to it so we can look at it. This is that method right here. We're passing the event args here so we can deal with them. And so here we start to deal with them right here. And when the event args tell us the file or files, it could have been multiple, the file or files that the user has just selected.
And so here, quite simply, we're taking the file, the first file that is in that files collection, and we're going to get a stream from there, and then set the stream as our media element source.
Let's see. Okay, beautiful. I love it. I love all that. All right, great.
Let's run it. Should we run it?
I think we should run it just so they can get the gist of what it was. We should have run it from the beginning. That would have been so good. It's great now, though. Le play. Oh, it's going to be in French. No, this one isn't localized. But if it was, it'd be in French. And it would also be called Le Player.
That's right.
All right, so we have a media element. Awesome that the media element that you'll be getting with your with WinRT XAML also includes all the controls to play, stop, and fast forward, and all things like that as well. So here it is sitting there totally empty. There's nothing going on. So I'll go down here to the open button. So here's the open button in our app command bar, or app bar. I select it, and we just launched it. Now everything is in French. This is sort of cool, and I'll have to kind of, it's going to be tricky, actually.
If we have some French speakers here, we may need your help in a moment.
Okay, the toots are here. All right, so the reality is one of the benefits you have from using WinRT XAML is the ability to access the SD card. SD cards are cool, no getting around it. We've faked an SD card right here in the emulator. You can attach a folder on your local drive and treat it as if it's an SD card and go from there. We did just that. So I can go in here and hit the ... which in French means more. And, and this, I could select that. Yeah, there's somebody who's translating it. I appreciate that. All right, now it's asking, I think, the location.
Yeah.
And
Telephone.
so this, I'm not, what is this one? You think?
It's telephone, I think.
Telephone. Who says the word telephone anymore?
I know.
Let me get the telephone. Yeah, mobile. All right, great. This is really tricky.
Cart SD. Yep.
I see. Cart
Nice.
SD, down at the bottom is the SD card. When I select that, now it starts going through all the SD card and everything is there. I have 4 videos already available. I can select it, and as soon as I do, now I just reactivated my application. All the code that Doug just walked you through, just executed, posts it back into the media element and starts to play, and here's the guy taking the picture.
Indeed. And actually, I noticed there's 2 buttons on that app bar.
You're right. I thought we
What could
didn't
we do there?
implement save file. We didn't.
We did not implement save file.
If you're a Windows Phone developer, you already know your application runs inside a sandbox. That sandbox is there to protect both the user's experience on the phone, protect the phone, protect other apps and everything, right? You just can't reach out beyond the walls of your sandbox until now. So the nice thing is if you're a Windows developer, you already know that you have the ability to share between 2 applications. That's app-to-app lightweight communication that's enabled and nice. You can pass a payload. Now you can do that on Windows Phone. That's what's enabled right here.
Yeah, so we're using the share contract within Windows Phone. So let's click it and see what we do.
You got it.
And then after that, we'll see how we did it. So you'll see that some applications is set up as share recipients or share, that's not the right word.
Share targets.
Share targets, exactly. So some apps can take the content that we're going to share to them. And in the emulator right now, we have the SMS messaging, OneNote, and Outlook. So let's go ahead and NFC as well. Which one do you want to try?
I wonder how NFC would work on the emulator. I haven't tried
Yeah,
that.
I don't think
Two-
we can
hold
do
2
that.
emulators together. All right, so I'll pick OneNote in this case, right? So OneNote will launch. OneNote's nifty. Also, by the way, OneNote works because I'm logged in with my Microsoft account inside the emulator, so it's pulling up the right one. You can see here it's a awesome video. It would be just like an email we would send, by the way.
Yep.
And instead of attachment, here it is, right here, the video itself. If I click on the video or tap, it's
Overwrite.
what
You already have it, so overwrite it. Yeah.
oh, that's what it was saying?
That's what it's saying.
Oh, yeah, that's all it was. Beautiful.
2 years of French class.
Nice. All right, anyway, it launches it for me, and no big deal, right? That's
Nice.
pretty great. So I've basically taken the movie off my SD card, put it into my application, shared it with a second application, in this case OneNote, that took it and then embedded it there as well. So it went a nice long trip, and the share contract enables me to do that, where before, there was no way to really do something like
Absolutely. But let's see, how do we do that in code?
that. Yeah, right, that's a great idea. You know what? I have it on a slide. Can we use the slide?
We can use the slide.
All right, great. So this is the implementation of the share source contract. So there's 2 here. The share source and the share target. You can share out, that's the source, and the share target. It's a little bit more work to do share target, but again, you may want to receive a payload for something. You can share a lot of things between each other, and we'll talk about it here in just a second. So talk about the data transfer manager.
Okay, so first off, you have to get an instance of your data transfer manager for your current view. With that, you can set up a couple of events. One of them is the data requested. The other one is the target application chosen, I believe. Right now, we're just going to focus on the data requested. So once we've set up that event handler, we're going to call the data transfer manager show share UI. So
Show share UI. That reveals the list of all the applications that can be shared targets.
So once the user has picked the target application that they want to send the data to, your application is going to be asked to what information do you want to actually share. So the two things you have to do, otherwise you're going to get an exception, is specify a title and then specify what you actually want to share. So we shared a video with one of the, instead of set text, there's other methods that allow you to share all different kinds of content. Set text is probably the easiest, and here you're just going to get a hello world message.
Set text, set HTML, set binary, set image. There's a lot you can set. It's really nice, as well as custom schemas that you might pass between them. Sometimes an interesting example might be an invoice schema that you might pass. And as soon as you do that, a Windows runtime is smart enough to filter all the recipients. Because if you're going to be a target, a share target, then you say which schema you're willing to accept. And so you can say only invoice schema, right? And then from that point forward, when people are sharing out text or whatever that may be fitting for, say, Twitter, your app doesn't show up. It's pretty great, actually.
Exactly.
Another great thing about the share, by the way, is you suddenly are leveraging apps that the user has installed in their machine, or on their phone, right? Apps you don't even know about, apps that haven't been written yet, apps that are super great, but you don't have anything to do with them. All they are share targets. So now you share out, and suddenly you have Twitter support. Suddenly you have this support, this support, this support, all these other different things like that. And so just this idea of using the ecosystem to make your application better is one of the neatest part around the share.
And a moment ago we were talking about localization, and you might code in your app Twitter and Facebook, et cetera, but in other parts of the world there's other social networks that are more prevalent, and so now you don't have to worry about it. It's all just done by share.
Last thing here is just let's look back. We didn't cover it all. There's no getting around it, but we covered the big stuff and the big fast stuff. You're a Windows Phone developer and you're familiar with the Windows Phone Silverlight stack, right? You understand how all the namespaces work and you've written applications and you're happy about it. Now you're about to migrate over to WinRT and you know there are going to be some bumps along the road. These are probably the big ones, right? These are the ones that are really serious. And so we talked about just the history of Windows Phone, with the point being Silverlight's still rolling, right? This is in parallel to it. No doubt about it.
No doubt about it. And then obviously you have some great options with the Windows runtime, particularly if you want to share code with Windows. We're seeing as many as 90% converged APIs with Windows and Windows Phone. And then we looked at a Windows Phone primer, a Windows runtime, not Windows Phone primer, a Windows runtime primer. And what did we see there, Jerry?
Well, we talked about background tasks. That was a big deal, right? Because of background agents, background tasks, this new thing around conditions and triggers that we get to know, and this thing that we really need to know around the constraints around CPU time. So your background task can't just go, and you have to really think it through around the way. Having said all that, these triggers are really helpful, and your ability to do things inside the WinRT tasks, background tasks, are really nice. And you might think, well, look, I've decided that I'm going to go ahead and go down the Silverlight route, but I'd really like to be able to leverage these WinRT tasks. That's totally all right. A single solution can have both the Silverlight UI and a WinRT background agent, background task. Which is like
Silverlight 8.1.
In Silverlight 8.1. Yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
Indeed.
Also around live tiles, there's been a change around live tiles, including the ability to use that background task to create it in XAML and render it out so you can have it look like whatever you want. This change in navigation so we don't use query strings, the back button implementation that you need to do. There's a lot of neat things. What was your favorite?
I think my favorite's the pickers.
Yeah, I think your favorite's the picker. The
Pickers
picker's a big deal. I mean, it's a big change in the mind, you know, that as soon as you launch a picker, you're going to have to be reactivated. It's an easy enough thing, especially if you're using fast switching. Fast switching, and on a normal device, like my device, let's say, it's not a low-end device. It has plenty of memory. My app is not going to be terminated, almost for sure. But on low-end devices, which is certainly one of the biggest market shares that Microsoft or Windows Phone has, you don't want to not provide for that, right? You want to support 256 devices.
Indeed. So actually, before we kind of summarize continuation, we did have one giveaway, but we wanted to ask, who remembers why we do continuation?
Yeah.
Sir?
You could be dead when it comes back.
Right, exactly. So in a second, you can come up and we got some nice headphones for you. All right. The code.
These are $600 headphones.
They're not $600 headphones.
Not US dollars.
You're going to be able to get.
French
We were
dollars.
talking about localization.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
So you're going to be able to get the code from this aka.ms Windows WinPhone WinRT, so WP WinRT. And the other thing to mention real quick is if any of you are interested in doing Converge with Windows and Windows Phone, I'm actually surprised they got the okay to do this because the book's not announced technically, so let's just keep it between us. But I'm working
And that
on
camera?
yeah, and that camera. So I'm working on a book right now on called Write Once, shared code across Windows Phone, Windows, and also Xbox One. And so that's going to be coming from Microsoft Press at some point in the future.
Mm-hmm. All right, last thing is, look, we're all developers together. We're all in this together. We can get through all of this. It's going to be great, right? We've got awesome Windows Phone apps already. There are awesome WinRT apps. There are awesome WinRT apps for the phone that are coming, right? It's just the way it is. And we can help each other. We can go through these pieces together. It's great. I wish all of you the best of luck. It's going to be a neat ride that we're on here where we start to converge. What we'll do is we'll close down right now. We got some questions, but I think just for the sake of time and to kind of honor that, thanks everybody for coming, and then we'll stay around for questions until Captain America starts.
Indeed.